Would you be lured into the sea by the beautiful song of a merman or the playing of his instrument? Today, we're going to explore just that with the tales of the Onijegi and Zen. The like button has jumped into a river and become a merbeing. Subscribe so that the sub button can join the like button as a merbeing. Let's dive into these myths that drive people to plunge into the water. The Onijegi come from Yoruba mythology, specifically in the countries of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. The Zen comes from Benin as well, and in neighboring countries Algeria, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Mali, and Niger. I've grouped them together for this video, and I will be creating a hypothetical being or cryptid that may have inspired these myths. Onijegi are female river mermaids with the upper halves of women and the lower halves of fish, similar to last month's Nomo. On screen is an illustration of an Onijegi from 1400 Calories and Other African Tales. In the Yoruba story, The Beautiful Girl and the Fish, featuring the Onijegi, we are first told of a river-dwelling fish who can turn into a handsome man. He lives in an undersea palace. This alludes to the possibility of an undersea culture. After the man is killed, his human wife throws herself into the river and turns into the first Onijegi. And while we see versions of this story all over the world, and I have plans to do a video on it someday, I also think that this could be a story made about a real creature. This could be a mythologized version of interbreeding and hybridization, just like in the Nomo story, wherein merbeings interbreed with humans and subsequent generations gain special abilities, such as being merbeings themselves. The Zen are described as jinn or water spirits in Songhai mythology. The term jinn comes from pre-Islamic Arabic society and is used to describe spirits who are lower than angels in Islamic cosmology. This term was likely retroactively applied to pre-existing Songhai spirits. One myth about a water spirit called Zen Kibaru seems to be an individual Zen. There is very little detail about the Zen, but given that the countries that they come from are either landlocked or have limited coastlines, and Zen Kibaru explicitly lives in a river, I can assume that the Zen, like the Onijegi, are freshwater merbeings and specifically live in rivers. Zen Kibaru fought the Songhai hero Faran. He used his magic instrument, described as a guitar in the English language source I read, but may have actually been a kora, a West African stringed instrument similar to a guitar. Zen Kibaru's playing made the fish eat Faran's rice. Faran gets mad and the two decide to fight. During the battle, they use magic on each other, but Faran's spell is stronger and Zen Kibaru loses. Other sources say that Zen Kibaru is blind and is able to control all river fish. According to Encyclopedia of Ancient Deities, Zen Kibaru has the title Master of Fish, which to me supports the idea that Zen Kibaru is a specific Zen spirit with specific traits and abilities. And while there are definitely eyeless fish, I think that Zen Kibaru is simply blind. Unless the Zen live underground, they're unlikely to be eyeless. And I don't think the Zen or the Onijegi live underground, as there aren't a lot of underground rivers in the countries where their stories come from. Most of the rivers in these countries are not particularly deep, but in the past, and maybe in remote areas, still today, there may be merfolk there. Although not mentioned in the myths, they may also live in lakes, but like the aforementioned rivers, none of the lakes in these countries are notably deep. Now I'm going to move into the speculative biology section. I'm going to go into this assuming Onijegi/Zen is either an unknown race or a cryptid. I will also explore a possible connection to the Nomo because the beautiful girl and the fish reminds me of the Nomo, who as a reminder live in Mali, which is geographically near where the Onijegi story comes from and is one of the same countries that the Zen myth comes from. The stories of the Onijegi and Zen Kibaru suggest a very humanoid creature, someone with a very human-like upper body and the ability to play a stringed instrument. These beings likely have lungs like the Nomo, enabling them to come to the surface and interact with humans. The lungfish that I talked about at length in the Nomo video lives in the countries where these myths come from. To recap, lungfish have both lungs and gills. They can breathe air and water and even live in mud instead of water for up to 4 years. They're also probably shapeshifters. The male in The Beautiful Girl and the Fish is a shapeshifter. The female in the story transforms from human to Onijegi, and the Zen being described as spirits or jinn implies some amount of changeability of form. I will go into more detail about this later on in the video, but we can look to real-world animals like axolotls, parrotfish, and California sheephead fish as a basis for shapeshifting. Like the Nomo, this cryptid is human-sized with a primate upper body and a fishtail lower body. To my knowledge, there are no illustrations of the Zen and only one of the Onijegi, the one I showed earlier that comes from a 1971 book. So I'm looking to real-world animals as inspiration for what the fishtail might look like. I'm also looking to Mami Wada, another mer being from Yoruba mythology, who is very similar to the Onijegi and comes from the same culture. The Encyclopedia of Ancient Deities describes the Zen as dragons, so I'm also considering snakes and other reptiles as influences for this illustration. In my illustration, I decided to draw a striped and mottled tail inspired by Central African rock pythons and catfish. Central African rock pythons are a type of anacondas that swim in Africa's rivers and are associated with Mami Wada. African catfish live in Africa's freshwaters, and some species can even breathe air. The tail is long and snake-like, inspired by this figurehead of Mami Wada and this African tray with a carving of Mami Wada. The upper body is very humanoid, and inspired by Zen Kibaru, I decided to make this illustration male. Based on the available myths, I think that they have two sexes and are not hermaphroditic like the Nomo. I debated back and forth about fur and skin color, and I ultimately decided that he's hairless with dark skin to increase his similarity to humans. Because Zen Kibaru could play the kora, I'm going to assume that like the Nomo, this creature has primate arms and hands. He has both gills and lungs like lungfish do. He has a primate-like mouth with dark lips. Similar to the Matabele, I'm assuming that this species has a very human-like primate face. They eat an omnivorous diet, including both fish and plants. Like the Nomo, they don't have noses, instead breathing both air and water through the gills. They also don't have outer ears. They have small slits on the sides of their head that lead to the inner ear and enable them to hear underwater. The stories don't give any hint of what his eyes might look like, but they're likely very large for seeing underwater. I decided to give him the same round black eyes that the Nomo has. Another important trait that this race has is the ability to shapeshift. Unlike the Nomo who change sex when they go on land, these beings are more like axolotls. Their tails can change into primate legs, enabling them to go on land, but they don't change sex. In real life, axolotls can't change back and forth. Once they change their terrestrial morph, they can't change back to their aquatic form. But the Onijegi/Zen can change into their terrestrial form and then back to their aquatic form. I was only able to find one animal that can shapeshift in any way close to the scripted. The mutable rain frog's skin can change from smooth to spiny in a matter of minutes. They're the fastest vertebrate to shapeshift. The mutable rain frog's skin can change back after changing to spiny. It just goes to show you that there are some truly mysterious animals out there. Never say never, there could be shapeshifting merfolk out there. Because of this trait, I've given them the species name Africanus morph. More on the scientific classification later. Before we get into the life cycle, I want to mention another unique trait of Africanus morph. We know from the myths that they are brilliant, human-level smart, or smarter, but they may also have the ability to communicate telepathically with fish. Zen Kibaru was the master of fish and could talk to fish, but is it possible that anyone could do that in real life? I'm sure viewers of this channel are familiar with extrasensory perception. There are some intriguing hints that telepathy could be real. I'm going to go through a few scientific studies briefly and link some more in the description. Firstly, the CIA has looked into the validity of telepathy more than once. A 1976 article about telepathy relating to Project Stargate was released via the Freedom of Information Act in 1998 and can be read online. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have looked into the possibility of mirror neurons in the brain enabling telepathic or empathic communication, and the way in which schools of fish and flocks of birds move in sync might also be possible because of telepathic communication. So I think that telepathy with fish could be possible. But what do y'all think? Now though, it's the part of the video where I talk about a possible life cycle for Africanus morph. Like the Nomo, they birth live young called fry, approximately 10 at once. Pregnancies last 4 to 5 months. They can swim immediately after birth. They breathe through external gills at first until their lungs develop. The fry are nursed by their mothers, just like the Nomo. I base this on the discus fish that makes a milk-like substance for their young. Africanus morph live in groups, maybe even in underwater cities. As adults, they're able to breathe air and can transform into their terrestrial form and go on land. They likely reach sexual maturity between the ages of 15 to 20, like the lungfish. As a side note though, the whale shark, which is another fish that births live young, doesn't reach sexual maturity until age 30, and they can live to be 100. I just thought that was unique and cool. Africanus morph can live up to age 80, like the mythic Nomo and the real-life lungfish. Africanus morph is closely related to the Nomo. Let me know in the comments if you agree. I put them in the same genus, family, suborder, and order as Nomo, all of which are made up by me. The genus is because they live in Africa, family Fluviatuli is for freshwater merfolk with lungs, suborder Numen means lungs, and the order Homo ichthyus is for all merbeings who are human on top, fishtail on the bottom. Come back next month to learn about octopuses with the faces of beautiful women.